All right, can everybody hear me? Somebody give me a shout out if you can.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, everyone. So welcome to the Monday night scripture study. I'm just filling in for Lily and Brother Rick. And for those that were here last week, we'll just carry on a little bit more about what we were talking about. Last week we talked about Babylon, Mystery Babylon, a little bit about paganism and just my understanding with that. And this evening we'll carry on with that. We'll talk some more about that and what a more fitting day, I guess, as the pagan. Today is the pagan New Year's Day uh, for the rest of our brothers and sisters that are out there blind, I suppose. So, what a better day to talk about it. And to start it off, maybe I'll go an hour, might be a little less, and then we'll just open it up for comments and questions, or if anybody else has anything to add to it, or wherever their understanding or wherever their studies are at. So I just picked as I was reading, both the scriptures and studying the scriptures this week, and some extra scriptural studying, some apocrypha. I just made some notes, and we'll try to keep it in line. I don't want to get all over the place if there's people that are new that are joining in with this. But I just kind of picked 2 Corinthians chapter 10 to start off with it, and I hope is that it kind of all ties in at the end. But we'll just go through this, picking up in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 1. And I'll read from verses 1 to 5. Now I, Paul, myself, beseech you by the meekness and gentleness of Messiah, who in presence and base among you, but being absent and bold towards you. But I beseech you that I may not be bold when I am present, with that confidence wherewith I think to be bold against some, which think of us as if we walked according to the flesh. My understanding, Paul is kind of defending himself for some of the persecution that he was getting at the time. But I think the important parts here, and as I go along in my studies, I'm finding more and more that it's narrowing in my vision, or my understanding of the scriptures is not as, for lack of a better term, as broad as it used to be. When I first got into my identity, when I first started studying my identity and became aware of it, it was exciting. It was shattering, psyche shattering, I suppose. But understanding that the white, the Adamic race, is the Caucasian race, is the true Israelite of the scripture. But as I go further along this narrow way, I'm finding out, at least in my understanding, it's being revealed to me, or I think it's being revealed to me, that it goes, a little more narrower than that. That a lot of this is being directed towards the very elect. So in verse 2 there, when it says, wherewith I think to be bold against some, which think of us as if we walked according to the flesh. If you look at the flesh, I kind of equate that to of this world. And Paul references that quite a bit. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. Although we are tabernacled in this flesh body, in this flesh world, being led by things of this world, of the carnal mind. When I was young, I used to think, carnal perhaps referenced just sexual, but it's all things of the flesh. When I think about that, I think about being led by our sight, our touch, our smell, all of these things. The adversary knows we can be easily led by this, chasing after that next shiny thing, or consumerism, acquiring things of the flesh, things of this world. Paul is saying, although we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. We are in this world, but we are not of this world. And we have to remember that. We have to be brought back to remembrance. We're going to be talking more about that. It's very important for us. If we want to live according to the Father, I have to keep that at the forefront of my mind. Otherwise, I'm setting myself up for disaster. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through Yahweh, to the pulling down of strongholds. Right? Our Father's weapons are mighty, and we have to keep that at the forefront. And now the point I'm getting at is the 5th verse down here. I was reading, I was listening to another lecture there the other day. I believe it was by Wesley Swift, and he referenced this. And now, while I do not think that all of these quote unquote teachers had it all figured out, and perhaps some of them had ulterior motives, he did make a good point about this, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of Yahweh, bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Yahweh, casting down imaginations. If you take a look at that word, conceit, right? Thoughts of man, thoughts of the flesh. I always go back to the traditions of the elders, the traditions of man, things of the imagination. Our weapons, the Father's weapons that He gives us, we are to use them to cast down the imaginations of man. We'll get more into that, and I'll come back to that, but we have to, just wanted to put that out there to lay that foundation. I don't know of anybody else, but before I came into my identity, I was definitely being led by the flesh, by the things of this world, and by the imaginations of this world, or the false consciousness of this world, or the false reality. And a lot of those, particularly at this time of the year, focused around, Christmas, New Year's, the other pagan traditions that we used to follow. And one of these, too, it would just use as an example that we just came through this, was New Year's. And if, when we're this far along the narrow way, trying to forge further down to it, things become revealed to us. And in the scriptures, we're told that once we're awakened to this, if we choose to go back asleep and start following, those things of this world again, that our punishment is twofold. So, and I realize that it's a pretty big pill to swallow when these things are revealed to you and you have to make those changes. And it's hard. It's hard for you. It's hard if you have a family. It's a big life change. So it's very important that you do the research yourself and not just take the words of man at face value, but to see these things for yourself. So I just figured I'd quickly touch on this New Year's. And this is just my understanding of it. And at the end, if anybody else has anything to add, please, by all means, share with us. But when I was looking into this New Year's that the rest of or most of the world celebrates in, we have to understand, keeping in mind Genesis chapter 5, verse 1, this is the book of the generations of Adam. This is the book, the history of the Adamic race. Almost all of this history has been hidden from the Adamic race for the sole purpose of pigeonholing Yahweh's people into paganism, into idolatry. Our Father is just. Our Father is righteous. Satan knows that Yahweh will also punish, perhaps even greater, his own people. Satan's after souls. Satan's after ruination of Yahweh's children. So the more of his children that he can curtail into paganism and idolatry, the better. But for our people on that narrow way, we have to take the time to learn these things. It is our responsibility to learn these things. Salvation depends on these things. So as far as New Year's, we've already been through the Christmas, and we did the Babylon thing. Ancient Babylon at that time was perhaps the biggest quote unquote government in the known world. So everybody knew about it. And most people, including our people, flocked to it. Just like the government of today. The government of Babylon offered food, pay, shelter, protection. It was a dangerous world out there then. Inside the walls of Babylon, though, things were a little safer. Things were comfortable. You had food, you had a roof over your head. You had all the degeneracy you wanted to distract you. But all you had to do was bow the knee to Baal, bow the knee to government, bow the knee to Nimrod, worship things of this world, things of the imagination. Today, it's a whole other thing. The whole world is encompassed in it and doesn't even know it. Mystery Babylon, behind the scenes. A veil has been painted over the entire truth. Most people don't even question it. So we'll go on to I'm just going to read something before I get into the New Year's, because it kind of struck me when I was reading this. Now, this is just from my copy of The Two Babylons, the complete and unabridged by Alexander Hislop, if anybody hasn't read it. And just it was striking to me, a couple of sentences. Now, they're talking about pagan religion and papal Roman Catholicism, the whore of Babylon, and the mother of the harlots and abominations, all those other things, those offshoots that come out of it, Christianity being one of them. But the grand object of both pagan and papal doctrine has always been to keep the souls of its votaries away from the direct and immediate intercourse with a living and merciful Savior, and consequently from assurance of his favor, to inspire a sense of the necessity of human mediation, and so to establish itself on the ruins of hopes and happiness of the world. So in other words, the sole purpose of the pagan religion of papal Rome is to break that connection from our Father, from our Messiah, and for us to put all of our hopes and our dreams in their hands. Satan is after the souls, to keep the souls of its votaries away from the direct, immediate intercourse with a living and merciful Savior. Now, when you think about our world today, most people out there are going around blindly with a sense of self-righteousness, thinking that they're doing good. They're going into these quote-unquote churches once a week. They're paying a couple of dollars and they're having their ears tickled and they're feeling righteous. Just like they're out there celebrating Tammuz's birthday and thinking that they're celebrating the birth of baby Jesus, right? And the same thing with New Year's. They're out there, celebrating, feeling good, and yet they have no idea what they are doing and how much they are damning themselves. So to talk about New Year's now, we're just going to read about before we go back to the scriptures there, the same book. And I'm sorry I don't have an electronic copy to bring up on the screen. And while I don't necessarily agree with a lot of things the author of this book says, I definitely don't agree with his idea of the heavenly host. He, as far as I'm only about 3/4 of the way through the book, but I haven't had any indication yet of him having a racial or a racial identity foundation with the scriptures. I believe I'm guessing he's a big proponent of Protestantism, but I didn't purchase the book for that, and I'm not studying or reading it for that. It is an excellent source of Babylonian symbolism. He does make there's some very good information on paganism and the foundations of all that, and that's why I bought it. And a lot of the stuff, this gentleman is definitely on point. But when we go into here, he talks a bit about New Year's, and you have to read there's a lot to read about this, but in my understanding, basically he is talking about New Year's as being a celebration of Cush, which was Nimrod's father, and Cush was the first to bring that information to the people in the first post-flood, the post-deluge empire that he set up. And there was a lot of this knowledge that was hidden from the people at the time, probably passed down through Cain. I'm sure Cush had access to this information. So a lot of these things were big with him. Phases of the moon, numbering was a big thing. Cush was the first to bring in arithmetic post-flood, counting the phases of the moon, the zodiacs, of which he used to baffle the people or kind of subdue them, put them in awe of his knowledge and his understanding of the way the fathers, remember we were given the sun, the moon for signs and seasons, the stars. So he kept that information close to the chest, him and his initiated priests, and they would keep the people under a spell with that. And so Cush, one of the names that he went by was the numberer. And the end of the yearly moon cycles were a celebration, him numbering the months. So it is my understanding that the New Year's that most of the world celebrates right now is in fact a celebration or exaltation of Cush, the numberer. And when you study these things and you try to understand them, you'll realize that most of these things, whether it be Egyptian, Hindu, Muslim, Christianity, and the rest of the hockey socks full of pagan quote unquote religions, they're all and the festivals that go along with them. And believe me, our people are out there right now and they are celebrating some pretty pagan and downright wicked festivals that they do not understand what is at the very root of them. And some of these are pretty shocking. And it still, takes my breath away to think that I used to be an active participant in some of these things, blinded by the imagination, blinded by the traditions of men. And anybody that's been this far along trying to live righteously and walk according to the Father, we have to study these things, and we have to diligently study these and share that information to help as many as we can come out of that. And I know Brother Rick has talked about it a lot, and other people, and it's one of the most powerful chapters in all the scriptures. 2 Thessalonians too, and in Revelation chapter 17, the Messiah talks about that. And the Father has our people under a strong delusion in order to fulfill his word. And that's why I'm starting to understand, or I think it's being revealed to me. And at the end, if somebody else please has another idea or more understanding, please share it. But although we can try, for the most part, there are our people are under that delusion by him as a punishment and to fulfill his word, to fulfill his plan. They are just cogs in the wheel of his plan. I don't want to say it's pointless because I believe we're supposed to at least get this out there, but I'm starting to think that perhaps this is only for the very elect. So New Year's, we're told, and let's bring it up there. So we know that, or at least my understanding is what folks just celebrated yesterday and are probably still feeling the effects of it today, is that Babylonian celebration, their end of the year celebration to Cush, the numberer. But we are told explicitly over here in Exodus chapter 12, right here, when the Father is talking to Moses and Aaron, and Yahweh spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month, and we're going to talk about it, but the month he's talking about is Abib. This month shall be unto you the beginning of months, and it shall be the first month of the year to you. And over here in Deuteronomy chapter 16, I do believe, Yeah. When he's talking about the Passover, that first month of the year, Abib, um, literally means from an unused root, meaning to be tender green. That is a young ear of grain, hence the name of the month, Abib or Nisan, right? That month of sprouting, that with the tender green buds start to come up. I know Brother Rick can probably add some more onto it, but I believe that month starts at the spring equinox, right? Why would the Father have the first month of our year in the dead of winter, right? When there's about an hour and a half of sunlight, what's going to grow there? Everything is buried under snow. It's the birth of a new year. Our people came out of Egypt. It was the first time we marched as an army. We came out as a nation, the birth of a new nation, of a tender green, young heir of grain. So, I mean, that right there is a good indication. And we're told in Exodus chapter 12 that this is the first month of the year for us, and we are to keep this forever, for our generations, forever. So we really have to dig in. We really have to study and try to live according to his laws, his words, to fulfill what he has for us, not the things of this world, not to walk in the flesh of this world, following after the imaginations of men. And the reason why they have our people so subdued is because it's a mystery. 99% of the 99.999% of the people do not know that they are under a spell. It's a mystery. Before I came into my identity, before I started being brought back into remembrance. And that is another word that we'll be talking about later. Not everybody is being brought back into remembrance. It's a good indication. It's only for, the very elect. Come out from under her, so that you will not have to be partakers of his punishment for the iniquity. He doesn't want us, perhaps his very elect, to have to be subjected to what's about to go down, because he is a just and righteous Father. And if we sin, and if we continue to sin and not turn to the Messiah and repent, remember the only way to the Father is through the Son. And you can make darn sure that we're going to feel some heat too. So, that's just one of the things we have to earnestly, diligently study to show ourselves approved. Approved of what? Approved of being joint heirs with the Messiah when that time comes. And we're told over here in Daniel too, that they were going to do that. I mean, people, how much more, if you need proof, how much more proof can you, when Daniel talks about that little horn. Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and a times, and the dividing of a time. They told us, he told us right there. And he let them do it as part of his plan. I kind of look at it as and I know Brother Rick has talked about this too, and other people. And I 100% agree that, and perhaps that's a little, perhaps we're getting a little more in depth for if there's anyone here new. But this whole thing can be looked at as a training ground for what's about to come when the Messiah makes his second advent. And, you know, the very elect gets to become joint heirs and rule with him. He wants to make sure that those standing up there with him have done the work, are fully up to speed. For how can they rule with him if, you know, they're fresh, they're brand new, if they haven't dissected and digested and fully studied the word? So, you know, and all of this is available for us, but the Messiah has told us many times, let him who hath eyes to see, see. Let him who hath ears to hear, hear. And over there in Revelation chapter 17, and I was talking about this here earlier. For Yahweh hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and to give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of Yahweh shall be fulfilled. Same as 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Now right here, Messiah is talking about it in John. When this comes to fruition, when the Messiah comes back and he goes to war with the adversary and his hordes, and he's going to war with the very elect, and he will defeat them. And when these people say, how can we let this happen? You know, and John says, how did they do this? How did they so willingly follow this paganism, this idolatry? How did they so willingly turn the Father's, this earthly world, over to the hands of the adversary and his children, and, you know, those of our people who allowed this to happen? For Yahweh hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and to give their kingdom unto the beast. So for those of us that are trying to make our way down this narrow way, that very, very, and I'm learning more every day, that it is a very, very small amount. The remnant means very few are trying to come out from underneath this, while everybody else seems to be following it off the cliff. When you ask yourself, how can they not see this? How can they not see these skies full of chemtrails? How can they not see the degeneracy in our children's schools and on our TVs and in the music? And how can they not see the idolatry and the paganism and the wickedness and, you know, these things that people call Christianity and other religions? How can they not see it? For Yahweh hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and size and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of truth, that they might be saved. Very important word in there. Verse 10, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish. Why did they perish? Why are they going to perish? And, you know, people may argue and say, well, he was talking about the time this was written. If you go back a few verses, he says, when the Messiah, at the coming of the Messiah, the first coming of the Messiah has already passed, you know, probably 25, 30 years before the writing of this. He's talking about the future. at the end of this age, which we are speeding towards. Why did they perish? And the Apostle Paul is telling us right here that some of them are going to perish. Why did they perish? Because they received not the love of truth. It didn't say because they don't have the love of truth. It says because they received not the love of truth. I'm certainly not going to speak for anybody else, but I feel pretty confident saying that I have received the love of the truth. I have received the love of the truth to the degree that I spent the last few years of my life almost obsessively studying and researching and trying to take apart the Father's word, because I have that love of the truth. I think, and for all of us regulars that are trying to make our way down that path, I think the Father has brought us into remembrance, quickened us with that love of the truth. But the ones that are going to perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth. Why didn't they receive it? Because his will has to be fulfilled, that they might be saved. And for this cause, Yahweh shall send them a strong delusion that they should believe a lie. We're going to be getting into that lie, right? That mystery Babylon. Fables is a big word, and another way to say a lie. That they might all be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. How true is that? How many of our people are walking around right now full of pleasure in unrighteousness, or pleasure, a sense of entitlement, a sense of fulfillment in self-righteousness, right? Pleasure. Think of the revelry, the celebrations, and all of those things that Satan has attached to this time of year, or this quote unquote season, right? Pleasure. It's all about the flesh, the carnal man. It's all about pleasure, instant gratification. So, and we just talked about that remembrance, right? Being brought back into remembrance. And Paul talks about that too in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Yahweh, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice. Now, my understanding is Paul doesn't want us, he's not talking about going and telling us to, sacrifice ourselves physically, that we are to, you can kind of look at it as a sacrifice when you try to shake off the carnal, this fleshly mind, this fleshly body. It is a sacrifice to go along this narrow way. You have to sacrifice friends. You have to sacrifice family. You have to sacrifice all those other things that make it comfortable and pleasurable to exist in Satan's world. So it is literally a sacrifice. And some people have been walking this narrow way for decades, some for their whole pilgrimage in this world. And that is a hard go. So I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Yahweh, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, set apart, acceptable unto Yahweh, which is your reasonable service. And I find the more I read Paul, and the more I understand that a lot of this is speaking only to the very elect. And that's not my words, we're going to see. It is a service. And our Father's not asking us anything unreasonable. We were put here for a purpose. And it wasn't to be out celebrating all of these, this paganism. And be not conformed to this world. Be not, he told us right back there in 2 Corinthians, shake off this world. We are in this world, but we are not of this world. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Folks, let's not take my word for it. By the renewing of your mind, the renovation, right? The regeneration, the being brought into remembrance, to renew, right? We've been quickened, as I've mentioned this many times before. When I first came into this, when I was first awakened, most of the stuff I didn't think I was learning. It felt more like I was remembering, like, wow, yeah, that sounds familiar. Even though, I thought it was the first time I was reading it, I was like, that's familiar. I've heard this before. By the renewing of mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of Yahweh. And I think coming up here, these are some pretty powerful things too that Paul is saying. And I'm so grateful beyond grateful that Yahweh brought people into my path as I was starting to veer off. I was shocked, or not shocked back into it. Shock is not even a strong enough word. I was knocked back into alignment and given a whole new outlook on the scriptures and the studies and the Father's word, and the deep spiritual writing of Paul and what Paul was really saying. And I think a lot of people get tripped up because you really have to open up your mind to the deep spiritual aspect and the racial. Paul is perhaps some of the most racial writings, and I believe even more to be pinpointed on the elect. 1 Timothy 1:4. Neither give heed to fables. And anybody that's been along this journey the last couple of years, and I don't know if it's another pitfall, perhaps it's frustration of people that are looking to perhaps denounce the whole, Genesis 5, chapter 1. This is the book of the Adamic race, the history of the Adamic race. People trying to disprove it, and I'm sure right out of the gate at that time too, Satan and his minions, his Edomite children, his mongrel Khazars, they were no doubt trying to since the beginning of time. They've been painting a veil over the true racial aspect of this whole thing. This, not even just the scriptures, this whole existence, this whole earthly experience, right from the time we've come out of the womb, is to break our connection with our identity. And they are constantly firing slings and arrows and anything to rebuke us. And at some point, we just have to turn away from that. Paul's telling us right here, don't get tangled up in that. Neither give heed to fables, fiction, lies, stories, the stories that have been painted over our Father's word, the virgin birth, the whole, any kind, even an apple, all of these things, fables. Don't bother giving heed to them anymore, to the fables, and to the endless genealogies which minister questions rather than godly edifying, which is in faith, so do. He's telling us, don't give heed to any of that. Don't get there, at least for me, it came to a point where, I've heard people mention it too. You will get to a point in your understanding, you will get to a point in your studies where some things will be, you will know, you will understand, you will have revelations, some things will be given to you that you might just not be able to explain entirely scripturally, chapter and verse, but you will just know. So, also over here too in chapter 4, and Paul is telling us again exactly what's going on now, exactly with our people that are under a strong delusion, that are being moved around that chessboard by the Father to fulfill his will, blindly following paganism, idolatry, traditions of men. He's telling us that most will depart from the Father's word. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that here he's saying it again. People are going to say, well, Paul was talking to Timothy about what was going on at that time. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times, these very end days of this age, some shall depart from the faith, in giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. We talked about that. Seducing spirits, how do they seduce us? If we have that carnal mind, and if we are walking in the flesh and walking after the flesh, it's pretty easy to seduce. And doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidden to marry and commanding to abstain from meats. Now, I don't think, but if you read that in context, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats, is he talking about meat? Is he talking about a T-bone steak? Or is he talking about that strong meat? How many people are trying to, as we learn more, we're coming off the milk and we're going on to the strong meat. And if you start telling people some of these things, you're going to choke them. They'll think you're crazy, right? Oh, you got to stay away from talking about that stuff. No. Which Yahweh hath created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. I'm going to read that again. Forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats, which Yahweh hath created. He created this for us to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. We're in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, because they received not the love of truth. When you get far enough along this journey, there are just some things. Remember that sacrifice that he talked about. We are going to have to sacrifice friends, family, relationships, perhaps even jobs. Because when you start no longer trying to walk in the flesh and walk after the flesh, and rather turn to righteousness down that narrow way, you're going to find out that there's not a whole lot of love of the truth out there. But for us, we receive them with thanksgiving because we believe and know the truth. For every creation of Yahweh is good and nothing to be refused. So again, he's talking about people out there chasing those fables. In Titus chapter 1, I believe he talks about, talking about the Cretians, but as we've seen, I believe a lot of Paul's writings, we just gave him a couple examples, and especially the first 2 chapters of Hebrews too. I believe he's again addressing these very end days. Titus chapter 1, pick it up in verse 13. This witness is true. Wherefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in faith, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men that turn from the truth. All right? He's talking about rebuking these things. When we hear them, rebuking them sharply, not giving heed to Jewish fables. Don't allow them. I know it's hard, but because they're everywhere. But we have to take that stand, I've had, especially at this time of the year, you have to tell your family, when they wish you those quote unquote holiday greetings at this time of year. And you just look at them and say, well, I'm sorry. I don't follow these pagan festivals, and neither should you. They're Jew fables. They're Edomite, satanic, Khazar fables, lies. Over here in 2 Peter 2, which is another very good one. It's not just all Paul. And this is an example too. And he's talking to us in these very end days. And he says a very important word. Wherefore, the rather brethren, racial brethren, your racial brothers and sisters, wherefore rather, brethren, give diligence to make your calling. Be diligent. This is literally, eternal life and death and your inheritance, joint heirs. Wherefore, rather, brethren, give diligence to make your calling, right? An invitation, literally, an invitation. You've been selected. Congratulations. Give diligence to make your calling and election. Your divine selection, chosen. Give diligence to make your calling and election sure. For if you do these things, you shall never fall. Now, if you go back and read the chapter before that, Peter's giving us, he's telling us, and he gives us that famous verse, right? He talks about faith and virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge he's given us instructions on how not to fall. And he doesn't want us to fall because to these fables, to these things of this world. If we follow these things of this world, especially when we come into remembrance, he's warning us, don't give up your inheritance, don't give up your election. Paul says, he fought a good fight. These men were, if we think we are suffering now, and yes, perhaps this world is not a little, far more degenerate than it was then. We have to remember these men, these early apostles and these early men of our race, They were persecuted pretty hard, whipped, crucified, beheaded, fed to tigers, fed to gladiators, right? Um, so, we're not alone in this. Because we shall not, if we follow these things, he's warning us, be diligent to make your calling and election sure. Keep it. It's the most important thing we can have. Yes, our racial identity is, it gets us to the door, but we're not through the door yet, because that door is pretty narrow. For so an entrance shall be ministered unto you abundantly into the everlasting kingdom of our Messiah and our Savior, the kingdom of Yahweh and our Savior, Yeshua. So we are, it's a long battle for sure, but we're telling us, the rewards at the end of this far outweigh the little bit of sacrificing and suffering we have to do there. And I used to think that it was, well, and I still do. It's hard. It's very hard. But the more you understand, the more you study, the more you learn, you realize that it is so worth it. Even walking through this chemtrail sprayed nightmare that we're going through now, when we know that the very elect get to be joint heirs and share in what's coming, it's so much outweighs that. Now, I'm just going to go over to and see. Yeah, I'll wrap it up here in another minute or two, and we'll open it up for some questions or comments, or anybody else wants to share their understanding, which I hope. Romans chapter 13, verses 8 to 14. Owe no man anything but to love one another. Now, when you go in and you study these words, you realize that Paul is talking racially here. Owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. For this, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. Covet, a very, walking in the flesh. And if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this, saying, namely, that thou shalt love thy neighbor, thou shalt love thy racial brother as thyself. For love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. And that knowing the time, remember these very end days, these very latter days, we've addressed that a few times already. And that knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep. For now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. And this was written 2,000 years ago. But we are at the precipice of that now. It's time to awake out of our sleep. Time to study, to show ourselves approved for what is coming, to show ourselves worthy to be joint heirs with the Messiah. Now, and I guess I realize, or why in my understanding, I guess, why not only is this, a racial, and a true Israelite identity, but also the elect. I mean, when you read the Gospels, the Messiah was speaking to the multitudes, and there was many of our own people there, and many of our own people had a hand in, the persecution, the crucifixion of the Messiah and also the persecution of our prophets. We killed many of our own prophets. It's not just the Edomite mongrels and the beasts of the field. Our people, we're being punished now for the disobedience of our people. Yahweh is using those aforementioned mongrels, beasts of the field, and these other things out there wandering around to punish us for our disobedience. So, you have to put that into context and see a lot of this is speaking only to the very elect. In my understanding, our people are, and especially the elect, carry three very distinct characteristics. Obviously, the body, our Adamic body, but we're also told our Adamic body is the temple of Yahweh. I'll refer you to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Keeping that in mind, go give that a read again. The body and the mind. The body is the first part. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 16, when he talks about the mind, how many of our people are out there walking around without a clue? For who hath known the mind of the Messiah, that he may instruct him? But we have the mind of the Messiah. And also the spirit. So we've got the body, that temple of Yahweh. The mind we have to put on. Paul's telling us in Romans and also in Corinthians to let that old man die. Let that old man that walked after the flesh with the carnal mind, coveting, adulterous. You got to dump that. When you wake up, you've got to awaken. You have to awaken when you learn, when you come into remembrance of what the end game of this is, when you are snapped out of it. You have to let that old body and that old mind die and put on that mind of the Messiah. And then that spirit, the infilling of the spirit, that love. You're receiving the love of the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the way to the narrow way and the truth. You received that love of the truth. Put it on. Allow that spirit to infill you. Pray for it. And I'll just finish up with 1 John chapter 5, verse 19 to 21. Sorry, not the Gospel of John, 1 John. Chapter 5, verse 19 to 21. I'll start in 17. All unrighteousness is sin, and there is sin not unto death. We know that whosoever is born of Yahweh sinneth not. But he that is begotten of Yahweh keepeth himself, and that wicked one toucheth him not. It'd be pretty hard, I'm speaking for myself, but it'd be pretty hard to backpedal, knowing what I know now and understanding what I know now, or understanding what I understand now. It would be pretty hard for me to backpedal into that. And we know that we are of Yahweh. We've put on the mind of Messiah. We've let that old man body die. We've received the love of the truth, and now we know unequivocally that we are of Yahweh. And when you take a look around, the whole world lieth in wickedness. And we know that the Son of Yahweh has come and hath given us an understanding that we may know him that is true, and that we are in him that is true. Even in his Son, Yeshua Messiah. This is the true Yahweh and eternal life. And right here, as we started it with all this idolatry and paganism, little children, John's referencing those of us that are new, that are coming in, that are those green herbs, those tender green herbs, those little children. Little children, keep yourselves from idols. Keep yourselves from idolatry. Keep yourself. This whole world is full of idols. He's warning us, little children, keep yourselves from idols. So be it. Well, we're a little bit past the top of the hour. Sorry for rambling on there, but we will end this and we'll open it up to comments, questions, and hopefully some of you all have some understanding of your own that you'll share. So with that, I'll conclude my part of it.
Hey, Gern, that was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. I have a question just for clarification. You mentioned the elect and the very elect. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on the difference between those two? Or is there a difference in your eyes?
In my understanding, sometimes I think I just say very elect just to emphasize the smallness of it, I suppose. I don't understand. Sorry, I don't understand that. I don't really see a difference. Perhaps somebody else might have some understanding that they could share on that. Or yeah, I think it's just perhaps a unconscious. I'm trying to express the finite-ism of it, I suppose.
Well, I think you're probably right in many ways there, Gern, and you did an excellent job. As far as Lily's question there, the way I look at it is we have Israel as basically the elect, if you will, of Yahweh, his people, his children, if you will. And then the remnant is actually the very elect. That's the way I look at it. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's the way I tend to look at it. And it is a remnant. Like you've been talking, it's going to be a remnant. I think Isaiah describes it as a tithe. It's what will be basically a tithe.
Oh, okay.
The number, as far as the number of Israelites that will actually be of that remnant, I think he describes it as a tithe. So not much, but you finished up there with 1 John 5:19-21. Let's not forget what 1 John starts out with. What is it? Chapter 2. He says something to the effect of writing to the little children. Little children, I write these unto you that you sin not. And if we sin, if not when, but if, then we have an advocate with the Father. But then he goes on and also describes young men in the faith and fathers of the faith, which have overcome the wicked one. And this whole thing you've been talking about seems to me to be tied in to what Paul was talking about with Romans 8. And that's why I've said it a couple of times on some of the podcasts we've done. But it seems to me if a person doesn't ultimately manifest that Romans 8 person, the one who is in line with Yahweh's laws and his ways and manifesting the Spirit of Yahweh in their life, and that old man has died to the point of where there's no excuse, then it manifests that I don't know what else to say other than it seems to suggest to me that you're not going to be of that remnant. Now, I'm not the judge of everything here, okay? So I'm not condemning everybody that's different from whatever view. But I am saying that it does definitely seem to me to be a fairly exclusive message, a very small remnant. And yeah, I don't know what else to say other than that. Romans 8 or forget it. Romans 8, manifestation or forget it. And the same thing you're saying here with some of these other passages. We can't just go ahead and read them and automatically chalk ourselves up as if that's us, like the church world does. And you're right, too, about what you said about some of the other things that they said, like they would think to change times and laws, and this false church system has been painted over the text, if you will, painted over the entire world, blinded. But Yahweh was behind this, allowing it to happen as part of a curse, because people do not love that narrow way that few find. That's what it looks like to me. Anyway, if I'm wrong, somebody else say something. Go ahead.
No, like right here in Romans 8, like you were saying, and I had that written, but I just kind of ran out of time, I guess. But for what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, Yahweh sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and people have to remember that. In the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin condemned sin in the flesh, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace, because the carnal mind is enmity against Yahweh. For it is not subject to the law of Yahweh, neither indeed can be. For then they that are in the flesh cannot please Yahweh. But ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. So, to me that's, and again, I always keep this at the front of my mind. Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. Right? He's talking to our people. He's talking to Israel. So he's saying that there are many of us that are out there after the flesh, following the flesh, walking after the flesh. And because the carnal mind is enmity against Yahweh, they're not going to please him.
Enmity is enemy.
Yeah. If we are walking after the flesh, like many of our people are doing, we're not going to please him. And he said, walking after the flesh, walking that carnal mind, for to be carnally minded is death. Is death. That's it. That's his words, not mine.
Yeah, it is. Is that just death of the body or death of the soul? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I mean, I can be out, we're all going to eventually, physically die. I think, that's the end game, of our fleshly body. It comes with an expiration date. I believe, I understand, when you read the whole, we're talking about spiritually there too. So, in verse, where is it at? Just give me a second here. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. To me, that's saying, but you are now in the flesh, but in the spirit, you're not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. If so be that the Spirit of Yahweh dwell in you. Now, if any man have not the Spirit of Messiah, he is none of his. And if Messiah be in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. But if the Spirit of him that raised up Messiah from the dead dwell in you, he that raiseth up Messiah from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his Spirit that dwell in you. So to me, that's saying, when that Spirit, that love of the truth, when you receive that, it's going to quicken your mortal body to that Spirit that's dwelling in you, and salvation. I mean, to me, that's what's saying. Your body will die, but your spirit is going to carry on.
Was Yeshua the first one who was actually raised from the dead? And
it's my understanding. Well, we know that Enoch and Elijah never tasted death, if I'm correct. But over here in Revelation chapter 1, somebody help me out. What verse here? He says the Messiah was the first begotten of the dead. Just trying to find out where the verse is at. If anybody has it right there. I know it's in chapter 1. Yeah, Revelation chapter 1, verse 5. And from Yeshua Messiah, who was the faithful witness and the first begotten of the dead, and the prince of them. Now, to me, I can see that as the first who received the Shekinah glory, the first begotten of the infilling of the Spirit, I guess, the first begotten of the first to be resurrected. That's my understanding, that the Messiah was the first begotten of the dead, yes.
And by the way, I know that might offend some, but I actually also use that phrase there as part of the defense that he actually did have a fallen nature, a sinful flesh. Yeshua did, which was converted. And that is exactly where, as far as baptism is concerned, where he became the first begotten of the Father. And there's another passage that that Paul references in Paul, that where it seems to confirm that same thing. I don't have it off the top of my head, but yeah, very good.
now, when you say the first begotten, you're not talking about being conceived, but being infilled, no?
Absolutely. We're talking about a spiritual birth here. We're talking about the old man nature dying and the new man being born via the Spirit of Yahweh. Where you're talking about total conversion. Remember, we talked about Luke, the passage in Luke a little while back, where I make mention that the Messiah told them basically that they weren't even converted yet, that they were going to be converted basically in Acts when the Comforter was given. And yet they had already manifest certain gifts of the Spirit, if you will, but from my understanding, the way the Spirit would come upon people, it could remove itself again. It would come and then it would go again, come and go again, type of thing. And that's how it was for a long time. But this new covenant scenario is where it actually comes and makes its abode in us, that Spirit. And this was part of the work, if you will, and necessity of Yeshua, the whole process by which transpired. It had to happen this way. And that's why you just read over there in Romans chapter 8, the very reason for the sinful flesh of the Messiah. I mean, this isn't some joke. And yet the church world condemns such thinking because they want to condemn the idea that you can awake yourself. In other words, awake to righteousness and sin not. They condemn the idea that you will ever be able to get out from under the priestcraft, and that you'll ever no longer need to pay their indulgences or whatever.
Go to confession.
Go to confessions, etc. So this is a complete. They painted over the whole message in essence. And will condemn and actually burned and killed people that taught some of the things that you were talking about tonight, Gern. And by the way, you are also in line with the Messiah's message when you're talking about how costly this can be. Because he also said, he that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. There's another passage, I believe, in Mark where it says you can, potentially you're going to lose everything. And there's another one that talks about even your life itself. So this can be very costly.
But like you were just talking about there, and I talked about earlier, and I'll just say it again for anybody that's listening, that anybody that's still on that fence, the doctrine of both pagan and papal teachings, the grand object of both has always been to keep the souls of its followers away from the direct, immediate intercourse with the living and merciful Savior, and consequently from the assurance of his favor, in order to inspire a sense of the necessity of human mediation, and so to establish itself on the ruins and the hopes and the happiness of the world. That's the whole purpose, in my understanding, of this whole, not just religion, this whole mystery Babylon that we are living in, is to cut our connection and my understanding, true Israel. We're the one that's after. We're the one that Satan's after from the get-go, to cut our connection, turn us away from a living and merciful and loving Savior, and to inspire a sense of necessity of human mediation. That's the only goal, is to establish itself on the ruins and the hopes and the happiness of us. Right? And, I think Paul and the Messiah are both, and they're telling us to shake off, come out from underneath it, come out from under it, shake off that fleshly, that carnal body and mind, and put on our true mind. And again, the Father tells us that he has most of our people under a strong delusion and a spell for the sole purpose of fulfilling his plan. And, as cogs in the wheel of his training ground, I guess, if you want to go deep, that's the way I think of it anyway. And I don't want to say we're being tested, but maybe we are. We're being trained for sure. And we have to do these things, like John said, and so as not to give up our inheritance, so we don't have to be punished. At least that's my understanding.
Very good. Hey, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but Daniel Baker, you grew up in that mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, religion of Catholicism. I remember some things that you told me about what the nuns told you about the black spot on the soul. Would you care to elaborate on that a little bit, just to tell some of the people exactly some of this false teaching that was being presented? Are you there, by the way? I don't know if he's there, but yeah, I just found that, like, he told me some of those things. I'm like, where is that written in the Word? This mother of harlots, abominations, they make people feel like if they don't go to Mass on Sunday, they'll get a black spot on their soul. And if you get enough black spots on your soul, you're condemned to death.
I mean, like, if I forget the exact term of it, and maybe Brother Rick might remember the exact term, but they had these systems set up where you could pay in advance for the sinning that you were likely to do, and if you did sin, and if you read enough, we're talking about some serious transgressions. If you had enough money, you could pay to the church to remove that black spot, or you could also pay a few extra dollars for some of your loved ones that perhaps were in purgatory or some more other wacky doctrines and ideas that they had.
That's exactly right. They were very wacky, for sure. I couldn't believe some of that stuff that I was hearing. The mother of harlots and abominations of the earth was, this stuff. I mean, talk about strong delusion. That was like delusion to the max.
Mm-hmm. It's still going on. Still going on.
One thing.
Oh.
Go ahead, Joy.
I just want to, I was just sitting here thinking, and I'm thinking, about the remnant or the elect, and I don't know, it just kind of came into my mind is what's going to happen to the non-elect or Israelites that, I don't know, wake up right at the very, the very bitter end of things. I mean, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to everybody else? That's, if they're not of the elect, what's going to happen? I don't know.
I think the Messiah tells us, just let me bring it up here. I believe it's in Matthew 25, if my understanding is correct. The parable of the 10 virgins. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins. We know this. It talks about making sure that our lamp is full. But at the end, when the husband returns or when the bridegroom comes, well, half of those 10 virgins or half of those late wakers, I suppose, while they're running into town to get some oil. But the wise answered, saying, not so, lest there not be enough for us. When they asked them for, hey, can you give us some of your oil? Can you give us some of your knowledge? Can you tell us what's going on? But the wise answered, saying, not so, lest there be not enough for us and you. But go ye rather to them that sell and buy for yourselves. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came. And they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. And afterward came also those other virgins, saying, Messiah, Messiah, open to us. But he answered and said, verily, I say unto you, I know you not. Watch therefore, for ye neither know the day nor the hour when the Son of Man cometh. That's a pretty scary statement, verse 12. But he answered and said, verily, I say unto you, I know you not. To me, that answers it right there. I could be mistaken, but that's my understanding. I don't think I'd want to hear those words, those 4 words, though, from the Messiah. I know you not.
Well, that being said, then there's not going to be very many people. There aren't going to be very many people at that door.
Very few.
Right? Well, I'm not even talking about the elect. I just mean the billions of people in this world that are under a strong delusion, or the billions of, I should say, Israelites, if there are billions of us left. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I'll just say this way: Romans chapter 9, the reading of the entire chapter, I think, to me, he pretty much says it all, what you was talking about right there. But at the end of the day, in that section of scripture, we get down to the end of it, and he says, you really don't have any right to ask us because he's the potter and we're the clay type of thing. He's going by his will, his plan, like you had been teaching the whole time. And while it might be shocking to our desire to be politically correct Western environment here, and have everybody have this opportunity, so that's just not the way it is. When you go in there, he says something to the effect of, For he saith to what shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with Yahweh? Yahweh forbid. For he saith to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy on, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So then it is not of him that willeth, nor of him that runneth, but Yahweh that showeth mercy. For the scripture saith unto Pharaoh, even for this same purpose, to satisfy what I want out of you. That's what he's saying. Yahweh would be saying, I made you, I molded you. You're going to serve the purpose I want. Even for this same purpose have I raised thee up, that I might show my power in thee, and that my name might be declared throughout all the earth. Therefore hath he mercy on whom he will have mercy, and whom he will he hardeneth. And that is the condition of many in Israel. And remember, this book is written to Israel, the white race, okay? And so we need not be looking in Mongolia or Pygmy Town, New Guinea, or wherever, Zulu territory, to find what truths we might be able to understand out of this thing. We're going to find it wherever Israel was. And that is also where you're going to find the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth primarily. And so we need not try to find that or try to convert that or define it as something that is not going to be applicable upon Israelites. And remember, the 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 passage you made a little bit of reference to, and that I harp on all the time, is addressing Israel. So it's just a dangerous thing. But the thing is he's dealing with a particular group of people, of a particular race of people, and listen, folks, he is using religion to damn a bunch of Israelites. Now go find out what is that broad path of false religion that he's got them on. And that's exactly what we're trying to nail down more details of, because most of us, not all of us, but most of us came out of some variant form of it or daughter of it, and we're still having to wipe the crap off.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I think too, in response to Jody's question, what happens to the non-elect, non-Israelites? Well, initially,
not the non-Israelites. No, not the non-Israelites.
I thought you were asking the non-elect, the non-elect,
but I mean Israelites, like the remaining Israelites.
The non-remnants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I did. But just in case. Yeah, even if, there may be some people that want to know what happens to non-Israelites. Well, initially Yahweh told Israelites to destroy them. When they were led into the promised land, destroy them. But Israel did not. They disobeyed Yahweh. And so what did Yahweh do? He says, okay, I'm going to use them as a rod of correction against you. Right? And in that respect, if he's using our enemies as a rod of correction against us, for us to go against them, if Yahweh's using them, that would be going against Yahweh's will, would it not? That's why I think we're instructed in large part, if we're not told again to exercise or execute judgment, then we must wait on wait on the Malachim to come and separate the wheat from the tares. But ultimately, he's going to destroy them all. Ultimately, only Israelites and probably only the very elect will survive and make it to the kingdom. But then there's this other thing about the millennium. What's going to happen? I think the very elect are going to rule in the kingdom when Yeshua returns, and maybe the elect, not the very elect, but the elect will be outside the kingdom, but it'll be a time of teaching. That's why I'm going through the book of Ezekiel. I haven't gotten to the end parts yet, but I think that's where Ezekiel talks about the very elect go outside the kingdom and actually teach those outside the kingdom the truth. So those who haven't, it's not a second chance, but those who never had a chance to hear the truth will hear it. And that's what I'm trying to flesh out in this book of Ezekiel, the audio study that I'm doing. But meanwhile, Brother Rick, do you have anything to comment on that?
I'll let Gern comment on it. Go ahead, Gern.
No, I'm just looking for, I think it was in Revelation here. See if I can find it, but yeah, and I believe maybe Jody and I were talking about this at some point, but that's my understanding too, that the very elect, I suppose, will rule with him. And what I'm kind of wringing out of this, I guess, with that whole training, for lack of a better term, process, that the underlying theme of this all seems to be, to me anyway, this understanding is to train up or get up to speed those very elect that will rule with him, and their responsibility will be for that 1,000 years is to, after the purge, will be to teach and make sure this doesn't happen again. To
Bingo.
get ready over those 1,000 years for that big climatic ending that our people will witness. If that, in my understanding anyway, if that big Gog and Magog war at the end of that millennial reign will be after this has been purged clean of all of that wickedness, that this will never happen again. That big climax will be the ending of it all, going into whatever happens after that millennial reign, whether it be an eternity of paradise. But those that will rule with the Messiah for those 1,000 years, their responsibility will be to teach and to judge and to bring quick end to any transgression, or to make sure this never happens again, for lack of a better term, to police it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Can I say something? Yeah. So this is just something else that I've been thinking about too, and I know it's been mentioned a few times now that maybe the scriptures were meant for or written for the remnant, and I just sit here and I kind of go deeper and deeper with it, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't know, maybe I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it maybe suffice it to say that the scriptures are for and about and to Israelites, but that the way that it's written, the deeper meanings, the symbolism, the things that only certain people are able to discern and understand and figure out, that deeper side of the scriptures is meant for the remnant. So that there's I guess more than one meaning to it, that on the surface of the scriptures is for the Israelites, the laws, in the just, I guess, general sort of life instruction is there for Israelites so they can understand and who they are and what they have to do, but that the deeper meanings, there's so many deeper meanings and secrets and things like that, as far as I'm concerned anyway, in the scriptures, within the scriptures, that only certain people can understand, and those certain people are the elect or of the remnant. And yeah, I don't know, does that make sense, or am I out of my mind here?
Nope.
I think that's why I think Romans 9 is saying. That's exactly what I think it's saying. So you got the bulk of Israel is also blinded. I mean, you got to keep in mind, remember the 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 passage, it is a curse to damn Israelites, not just blind them, to damn them. And keep in mind is another thing, as far as the millennial time, there is a resurrection of the dead at the second coming, and then also those that are alive and remain at his coming will be transformed and given a new body. However, those of Israel who have not quite made the grade, they're not going to see a resurrection until the end of the millennium. And so if we're going to be educating people in the kingdom to come, it's not resurrected Israelites that are getting a second chance. My point is the second chance theory has got a little problem in my view. So I'll just say it that way. So anyway, and you're right, but Jody, as far as I'm concerned, that's my understanding. That's why I said, I used the holodeck scenario on Star Trek because it's so definite. It's so cut. To me, I know it's silly to some people's mind, but that's the way I understand it a little bit. In other words, you walk into you come in from a reality into a false reality where you're basically living a make-believe scenario, and most of the people around you have got nothing in reality to do with reality. They're just fake images playing a role or a part in a plan that Yahweh started, and he has no intention of saving them. None. Zero. And it ain't going to happen. Case closed, as far as I can tell. And I know I use that phrase a lot, but it's definite. It's definite. It's not like I don't see a solution around it. I'm willing to listen, okay? But I don't see a solution around it. So, the Romans 9 chapter is not just one of the most racist chapters, but it's also most definitive as far as who Yahweh is actually looking out for and interested in. And it's a remnant. And that's why I said a while ago, I think Isaiah talks about it as a tithe, Tithe, I believe they spell it there. But
isn't a tithe like 1/10?
Well, that depends, but it can be more. But we're not dealing with a whole bunch. We'll just say it that way.
Okay, but maybe there's still, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, there's got to be, so there's NPCs, obviously, of our race, people that he's using, like you said, but that there's also Israelites kind of in between there, like they're sort of one level up from the, I don't know, like a video game, one level up from the NPCs, but one level down from the elect, but that, that they understand the scriptures and they have that, they have that wisdom, but they just don't have the wisdom at the level and the depth that the elect have it, or there's certain people have it. Because I just think that there has to be people out there that do understand it on a greater level too. To me, I mean, I don't know, there has to be, because like Vance, when he was reading in Mark there, or Matthew, sorry, was it Matthew? That, like, there's going to be people, kind of coming up, hey, can you save me too, kind of thing. Those are going to be the NPCs. Those are going to be the people that just absolutely have no clue up until that point. But there's going to be people that to me have some level of understanding, because there's going to be people left. There has to be people left here to govern, I guess, for lack of a better word. So they have to have some sort of, I guess, level of understanding just not
there
as
is,
deep, just not
right.
as deep as the elect, because the elect have to have a deeper understanding. They have to. I don't know if I'm making any sense here.
Well, keeping in mind that, and this is just my understanding, but keeping in mind that this book, these books and this history is only for our race. I'll pick it up in Revelation chapter 21. It is done, verse 6. And he said unto me, the Messiah said unto John, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Tau, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. He that overcometh shall inherit all things. And I will be Yahweh, and he shall be my son. But the fearful, and the unbelieving, and the abominable, and the murderers, and the whoremongers, and the sorcerers, and the idolaters, and all the liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. And then if you go, then they describe the kingdom, his physical kingdom, that will be here. And then if you go down to verse 21, or sorry, Revelation chapter 21, verse 23, and the city had no need of sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of Yahweh did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. And the nations of them which are saved, and the nations, now we know what the nations are, right? He's talking about those Israelites that are outside the walls. So some are obviously going to be saved. And the nations of them which are saved shall walk also in the light of it. And the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honors. So people are going to come, and they're physically going to come, and they are going to honor this kingdom. And the gates of it shall be shut at all by day, for there shall be no night there. And they shall bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it. And there shall in no wise enter it into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh an abomination or maketh a lie, but only they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. To me, at least I get this picture in my head of a physical kingdom where the Messiah will come and reign here with his very elect as his administrators. Nothing is going to get inside of that that's going to defile it. There'll be no wickedness in it. There'll be no lying. There'll be no idolaters. But those nations will come to the door to worship it. And at least in my mind, in my understanding, and in my limited vision of this, I see that as being the center of he's telling us, his one world government. And those very elect who will be trained up, for lack of a better term, and who we're told that will be given their Shekinah glory back so they can be there for that millennial reign, right? They will get back our original glory that was given to Adam.
Right. So what I'm saying then, I guess, is so these nations that come to the door, there has to be people, like those people have to have some sort of clue, I guess, if for lack of a better way to explain it, right? They can't be complete deviants and degenerates. And so, it's like along this journey, where you've met people that they have, a really strong knowledge of the scriptures and a strong knowledge of, or like a strong foundation. Like, I think that there's people out there that they know who they are. And I think it's safe to say that maybe those people will be the people that, they will be saved, and they will be the remaining, I guess, if that's how you explain it, right?
For sure.
Outside of the walls, outside of the remnant and the elect. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out, I guess, in my mind, like who, how how are the elect determined? What? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking too much.
No, and I think when this all goes down, there will be no doubt in anybody's mind what is happening and who the true Messiah is and who those very elect are. And I know Brother Rick has mentioned to it before, and I 100% agree, and I see it in my mind. There will be a great purge. There will be a great purge for those, and there's a lot that have to go. We're being punished for our disobedience, and those that have been extremely disobedient will be purged, and they will have to go. And for those that are left, for those that are deemed worthy of carrying on, there will be no doubt. There has to be some of us left. And we're told in Matthew, right, those days will be cut short. For the elect's sake. Otherwise, there'll be no flesh left. So there will be some that will be saved, and there will be some that will be inside those walls. And perhaps there will be some physically beating on those doors, and the Messiah will say, sorry, I don't know you. Next. You're outside those walls. You're outside those walls, and you will get to live in this purged paradise that will be free of, Satan will be locked up for 1,000 years, and his little minions will be all purged, and there will be some that will have to build this paradise, and that will have to clean up the mess. I believe we're told in the scriptures for 10 or 20 years they're going to be picking up the bodies or something like that. And those will carry on in paradise, and they'll know no more of this chemtrails and poison food and stuff. But there will also be those very elect that will be administrating this whole thing with him too. Yes, I believe that there will absolutely be. There has to be. We're told there has to be. There will be many of our race that will be left to prosper and build up and nurture this world. But I even think that number is going to be pretty small too. But those that were ruling with him will be truly a very remnant, a very few. At least that's my understanding.
Yeah, it seems like, so you have Malachi there warning us that most or many will be ashes under our feet. Mm-hmm. You do have the one world government being prophesied and promised. And that, Revelation chapter 2, 26, 27, you've got Daniel chapter 2, 35, Daniel 2, 44 to 45. That kingdom, though, will grow. And in Daniel, it is talking of it as being a mountain. So, like I've mentioned to you before, a mountain is symbolic of a kingdom or government. And so it says it will grow to encompass the whole earth. Now, so now back up for a second and just close your eyes and think about this for a second. You have a second advent. Messiah basically returns. There is a gigantic purge of many that are living. And yes, there are going to be some peoples that are left, but they're going to be a huge wipeout. Whatever that looks like, I don't know. But it does talk about it as being some of them being ashes under our feet after it's all done. Okay? And then this government kingdom is put in place. There's where you're going to be kings and priests ruling and reigning with Messiah as joint heirs, etc. A remnant. The remnant is, remember, there's been a resurrection also. And that is your resurrected Israelites, the righteous. And they've received their new bodies along with those that were alive and remain till the coming of the Messiah. They've received their new bodies, etc. So there is your governing body. And that's probably, I would say that's in the many millions, because you're talking about over all of time, or all of, not time, but all of the phase of the Israelite contract, if you will, or actually the Adamic contract, because you're going to find Adam, I'm assuming Adam and Eve, you're going to find other whites that, like Shem. Shem is not an Israelite, but Shem is definitely one of the chosen elect remnant. So that's who's going to be resurrected. Noah and such, yeah. So there's your resurrected body of governance, if you will. Governing what? Well, Isaiah 60 verse 12 tells us, for example, for the nation and kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish. Yea, those nations shall be utterly wasted. Now, see, I'm going to go back to what Israel was commanded to do when they came into the promised land. Like Lily started off with, Israel was supposed to drive out or kill off the inhabitants. And it goes on and says, as you need more land, I'm paraphrasing dramatically, but as you need more land, then you would drive them out or kill them off, etc., and keep expanding. What would have been the end result today? 23,000 years later or so, if they had done what was commanded there? How many Israelites would there have been in the world? White people. How many white people would there have been in the world?
All of us.
Yeah, you see, now my contention is, I think that's exactly what will happen in the millennium. That this will continue, what you see promised in 60 and 12 of Isaiah, regularly nation will be wiped out. Next nation, wiped out. Next nation, wiped out. Yes, you say 1,000 years, that's a pretty long time. Yeah, I don't know what all the details, but it looks like that's what the last battle is really all about. Satan is released for a season to make the final effort, purge, and there's the total cleanse of the entire earth, kingdom, fully grown, encompassing the entire earth, and Yahshua, all enemies put down, all adversarial forces put down. Death is at an end, no more, and he hands the kingdom over to the Father. That's the end of the millennium. And there's where your ages after ages comes into the picture. And, yet keep in mind, we've received our new bodies 1,000 years before that. So now, if I'm wrong on that, I want somebody to explain it, because that's what it looks like to me. Now, yeah, I could be, by the way, I know this really sounds sickening to some people's ears, but if Yahweh wanted the blackest black guy to live in his kingdom, that's fine with me, but it ain't going to be, it's not going to be Mike Tyson, let's say it that way. It's not going to be certain entities in this world. He's going to purge. He's going to purge them by the billions, people. Billions. We're talking about a major depopulation event that's going to happen at the second advent, which I suggest is really possible in our lifetime. And I'm 60 years old. So I'm just saying, everything is pointing at a major event soon, and then a process of time to bring about the total purge. But we are going to have a major purge right at the beginning. But as far as a second opportunity for Israelites, the ones that spit in his face, let's say during our day and age, I mentioned about my own dad, folks. He was a good guy as far as good is concerned in the world. But remember what the Messiah says, there's none good but one. And my dad did not study and read his Bible. He didn't give 2 cents far as that's concerned. He was a good man as far as the world is concerned. He would give his shirt to you off his back type of thing, and he went to church, never read his Bible, never studied it much at least. He told me he'd never read his Bible completely, about 6 months before his death. I'm just giving him as an example. What's going to happen to him? You guys tell me. What's going to happen to him? Oh, if I went to the Worldwide Church of God, you know what they're going to tell me? Oh, he will have a second opportunity during the millennium. He's going to be raised from the dead, and he's going to be educated in the righteous path. That's not what my Bible said. My Bible says he's going to see a resurrection unto damnation at the end of the millennium. That's what it says. Judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else to say. Hey, I would love to hear something better than that. I'm not trying to be mean. I use my dad as an example to keep from trying to be mean to anybody else.
Those names that are added to and removed from the book of life, right? There's no guarantees.
Right. That's right. This is not a joke, people. This is a required manifestation. The Romans 8 person must manifest in your life, or else. It's not a joke. It's not a halfway. You can't go to church and sing in the choir and have that justify you. And what I really want to drive home is that we know enough about this book to know that it is real. It is supernatural real. It has got a message written underneath the paint job that the devil put on it. And you can perceive it. Some of you in this room can perceive it. It's just shocking that to me, it is real. And when I realized that the false church system was what I classify as Christianity, and I realized that the majority of the world is deceived by Satan, as it says, and they're on the broad path that leads to destruction, not on the narrow way that few find. It made me understand. It made me understand that it is going to be a few, and he is going to wipe out a bunch. And he's got it intended that way, by the way. It's intended. That's part of his plan. That's shocking.
I wanted to mention something too, in relation to what you said, Gern, about the 10 virgins. And we know that only 5 had oil in their lamps. And that oil, I think, is the truth. The other 5, what I think is really significant about those other 5 is they went to the 5 that had the oil and said, give us your oil. Now, what that tells me is they did not study the word for themselves. They wanted someone else to tell them what the word says. Kind of like Brother Rick's father. He didn't read his Bible. He relied on his pastor to tell him what the word says. How many, quote, believers or Christians, as the case may be, don't study the word, but rely on their ministers or their pastors to tell them. And they're not getting the truth. They're getting, falsehood, and they're going to perish. When Yahshua returns, they're going to say, oh, didn't we prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name? And what does he say to him? Get behind me, I never knew thee. The only way to get to know him is through his word, study and to show thyself approved.
Personal relationship.
Yes, bingo.
And that was one of the big questions that because I heard 2 Timothy 2:15 quoted all the time. Study to show thyself approved. Study to show thyself worthy. Okay, but worthy of what? That's great that we're being but you have to find out what you're worth. There is there's a pretty big treat at the end of that study, which I'm nowhere near reaching, but I've seen enough markings on the trail to know that it's something big at the end of it. There has to be, what am I worthy of? And Rick was talking about Romans 8 there. And for all of us in this room and those that we haven't even met yet that are of the same mind, how hard it is. But Romans 8, for I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of Yahweh. For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who hath subjected the same in hope, because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of Yahweh. For we know that the whole creation, and I think these last two verses are pretty impactful. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth, those birth pains, in pain together until now. And not only they, but ourselves. And I believe Paul is talking to the very elect here. Not only they, but ourselves. How many of us have felt like this all the time, which have the first fruits of the Spirit? I believe that those that are studying and diligently seeking after receive that love of truth are getting those first fruits of the Spirit. Even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. To me, that's saying, so we're almost excited, or we're just, come on, hurry up, let's do this, waiting for that adoption to the redemption of our body. And the more you study, or the more I study anyway, the more I feel that, and the more I'm just like groaning. But it says there, groaneth in those birth pains, in pain. Enough is enough. Let's do this. At least that's my understanding.
Well, it's getting late, folks.
It is. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we got to get going. But this has been really, really nice, really good, really informative and interesting. Really appreciate you taking the lead in this. And
Oh, my pleasure. The more I do it, the more I learn.
Right. Yeah, I find too that the more we share, we learn when we share.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
When two or more gather in my name, he's there. Right? So praise
Hallelujah.
God.
Well, y'all take care, and we'll see you next time. We'll be back Wednesday night with don't know what subject we'll be talking about, but we'll come up with something.
Probably just a chat of some type, yeah. Unless you got something else, Gary.
No, chats are always good too.
Okay.
Okay, well, good seeing y'all. Yahweh bless. Good night.
Yes, Yahweh bless. We'll talk to you guys soon.